Well, I think one of the biggest accomplishments, I'll start off with, is I think the budget. In a tight budget year, we were able to come together, still do tax cuts and tax relief to the citizens of the state. This is the 5th year in a row. We made public education funding a top priority again with 4% WPU increase, with several other large significant investments on top of that in public education, including a direct increase to teachers on salaries and also to support staff on with bonuses. And then again, education, career technical education. Most of you are aware that's something that I'm super passionate about. I was really surprised at how well that was received by the school districts and by parents, kids, and the citizens of the state. So we're excited to get technical education back into the high schools again, make it a larger priority. I think that's an area where you'll look to see us expand on in the future. Higher education. Those of you guys who've been following higher education over the last couple of years, the changes that have been made there are monumental. And I really am excited about the direction that is heading, I think, for the students of the state, as well as for our economy, as well as for higher ed and the future of higher ed. I think there's a lot of excitement there, and I just want to thank folks inside of our higher education community working with us. It'll still be a little bit touch and go as we're going through and figuring out which programs to collapse and where they bring together, and which universities get which programs, and then which areas get expanded. So there's still some tough work to do on that, but we're committed to the process, and I'm excited for the outcome. Anything, Representative Moss? Energy's, we started energy last year. Utah will be a leader in energy moving forward, and we're very grateful. We have guys like Representative Jack and Representative Carl Albrecht in serving in the legislature with their expertise that they bring. So
maybe I'd just add to that, Speaker. We talked a lot about affordability, and maybe these are things that today aren't going to be as impactful, but the decisions we're making for the policies we're doing in energy, and we're talking the next 10 years, 20 years for the state of Utah, they're going to pay us to help us make sure we keep that energy prices affordable for our citizens.
That's Utah. We're very fortunate to have one of the lowest energy prices in the nation. I think today it's second lowest in the nation. We want to continue that well into the future. So, okay, yeah.
It really seems like this year the legislature flexed its muscle on a lot of things in terms of not just these policies that you've been touting here, but also there's been pushback about local control and whether the legislature is overstepping its authority with either the Beehive Development Agency legislation, Salt Lake City streets, things like that. How do you care to address that?
Well, I would say we were on the Salt Lake City streets, the Salt Lake City public safety issues. We were reacting to our constituents on that, 100%. And I'm very grateful that Salt Lake City also came together and worked together collaboratively. Again, I felt like it was really a win-win solution. We were able to work with Salt Lake City to find a solution forward. It's probably not the way that we would like it to have been, and it's not the way Salt Lake City would have liked it to have been. But again, we're focused on good outcomes, and I think that was a good outcome.
But like even in the case if there's a protest outside about the flag bill, you're telling certain communities or counties you can't fly certain types of flags.
Yeah.
Is that an example of, again, maybe too much control over everything?
Again, I just don't think the political flags and those types of things should be in our classrooms. I really don't. Let's focus on educating our kids. Let's focus on what government should be focused on, and that's serving the people, not making political statements.
Speaker, we talk a lot about the Utah way here and how the process of negotiating and trying to bring all the stakeholders to the table makes policy better.
Yeah.
But there were several examples of policy coming from the House, whether it was HB 300 addressing election security, or some of these immigration law enforcement bills that were there's lots of energy around it in the House, and then some people would say they got watered down in the Senate. So I'm wondering whether you
I'm
think,
one of those.
so I'm wondering whether you think in these instances this process made policy better, or was an obstacle to getting good policy across the finish line?
Brigham, you're married, I'm assuming.
Yes.
You know the art of compromise. And that's what I think is most important, is, look, I don't think any side gets its way all the time. And so, trying to find the ways to come together is what we do. Yeah, there's some things that I didn't love as part of the compromises. There's things that the Senate didn't love as part of the compromise, and I'm sure there's things the governor's office didn't love as part of some of the compromises. But working together is what I think we're really trying to focus on. A good example of that was with the judiciary, and finding a pathway forward with the judiciary. We're very grateful for the justices and the Chief Justice specifically for coming together and finding a pathway forward to benefit the citizens of the state. We're proud of that.
Do you feel like there's work left over for next session when it comes to elections and public safety? Is there work left over from this session because we didn't get there?
I think we should always continue working to improve the process. And so, yeah, I think, as we look at what we did, as we look to try to get those processes implemented, especially on elections, I have no doubt that those issues will continue to come forward and we'll continue to refine the process as we move forward.
What was it about this year, though? It did seem like there was a lot more conflict between the House and the Senate this year. Why was this year different?
Well, it's a new House, it's a new Senate, and lots of energy all the way around on both sides. But, conflict, that's the way the legislative branch is set up, right? And there's supposed to be that balance between the houses inside the legislative branch and the different bodies. And that's a good thing. That tension is healthy. And I'm very proud of our colleagues in the House. I'm very proud of our colleagues in the Senate. I feel like they managed that tension really well. Now we got, 6 hours left still probably before it's all done and over with. We'll see. Hopefully that continues.
So we're gonna end at 10 p.m.?
Just saying.
Okay, I guess.
We're actually counting the hours.
Yeah, I don't think
10
we're gonna get
p.m.
done early this year, so.
You heard it from the speaker himself.
Should we expect any surprises? Any last minute things that will catch people off guard tonight?
Well, I'm sure there's gonna be things that catch me off guard, so we'll all stay on our toes.
Mr. Speaker, the legislature has made a point of highlighting tax cuts. But there is a bill out there that would actually raise taxes for seniors by cutting the circuit breaker program. Is that bill going to be heard in the House tonight? And what's your position?
I'm not aware of that. I don't think that's what that bill does, Brian.
Yeah, well, it did at one point, it may still do it.
Yeah, I don't think it raises taxes.
It would end the circuit breaker program, and so certain people would not be able to claim circuit breaker status.
I think, and I'm not gonna get into that bill because I don't know, but that bill doesn't raise taxes, so, we're not focused on raising taxes. Again, we're focused on cutting taxes.
How accessible do you think legislators have been this year to the people, to the press, to everyone who wants your ear?
I feel like I've been really, I feel like legislators have been really accessible, especially in the House, so.
Well, we see the Senate every day.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry, say it
We
again.
have media availability in the Senate every day.
Well, if anybody calls and wants any statements, we always try to work with you, so.
It does seem more difficult to get legislators, individual legislators, to be able to speak, and perhaps they're afraid of, stepping on your toes.
On my toes?
Well, leadership's toes, et cetera. Is there enough access
I think,
to the lawmakers?
I think there's plenty of access to lawmakers, but I think that's kind of a silly question, Brian, to be
You do.
honest with you. I do.
Because
Can I ask about,
Tell me one time that I've denied access to anybody. Thank you.
can I ask about, the transport utility fee bill? Is that gonna get encircled?
I think that, there's still some discussions going on that bill. We'll see. I think that, all sides agree that it needs to continue to have discussions. Whether or not those discussions, happen over the next 8 hours apparently, or 12 months, we'll see what happens,
The
so.
sponsor said she was not inclined to uncircle it at this point.
Yeah,
I just didn't know if that was the shared view.
well, I never say never, so the only thing that I know is that there's agreements to keep the discussions going. Whether that's over the next 8 hours or 12 months, we'll see how that happens.
Speaker,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
thank you. There have been 26 bills relating to federalism introduced this session, and like the idea of emphasizing the powers of the state versus the federal government. And I just wanted to ask if you guys have any thoughts on why there are so many bills emphasizing this idea of the session and why that's important.
Yeah, it is really important. I mean, you look at what's happened to the state of Utah over the last 4 years with the Biden administration trampling on states' rights and actually taking rights away from the citizens of the state. You're seeing that pushback come across not just Utah, but all across the country. There's several initiatives being started all across the country, including Representative Ivory here in Utah. And we're very proud of the work that he's doing, that he's leading out on. And it's super important to us. You guys know that it's one of my top priorities. Again, I think we move, from defense position with the Trump or with the Biden administration, and go to the offense position with the Trump administration. And we're already seeing some wins there with more power being returned back to the states. So we'll see how that looks as we move forward. Honestly, I think it's one of the few areas where there's bipartisan support. And so let California be California, let Utah be Utah.
Speaker,
Yeah.
we reported this week that Representative Hall's husband was sued for medical malpractice a couple of years ago. Were you aware of that when the House voted on the medical malpractice bill, and do you think there's a conflict of interest?
I wasn't, but my understanding is it was dropped right
It was,
away.
he was dismissed
Yeah.
from the case.
Yeah, no, but I think that goes to the point, right? Because you get these frivolous lawsuits that come in, cost, doctors thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in some cases, and raise the cost of health insurance for everybody. So I'm very proud of the work that was done on that bill. And again, we're here for Utah. We're here for Utah residents. We're here for the citizens of Utah. Lowering the cost or stopping the increase in the cost of healthcare is super important.
Do you think she should have disclosed that publicly?
I think all of her conflicts of interest are disclosed. It's on the website. I think everything's disclosed. So again, it's a frivolous lawsuit that was dropped.
Speaker,
I don't think it's an issue.
On HB 300, there's been a lot of talk about, is it for election security and integrity, correct? Adding the last 4 digits of your social security number, or not social security, but like a valid
Driver's
ID.
license and-
There's been some talk that is actually less secure than having to verify a signature because anybody could memorize the last 4
Yeah.
digits of a driver's license. What is your answer to that? And is there anything in interim that's going to be fixed to address the security concerns that this makes elections less secure?
Well, I'll come back to the best was the paper ballots, dropping them off, getting your ballot in the mail, taking that paper ballot, dropping it off, showing ID. I think that's the most secure. Again, you look at vote by mail, we know the number one problem with vote by mail is the signatures. And we have 3 audits that show the signature process needs to be tightened. If you tighten that signature process, this year we already had 20,000 votes that didn't count in the state of Utah because the signatures didn't get verified. If you tighten that process up, it then becomes a lot more than 20,000 votes. And so the Senate wanted to try this route. We'll see how this route works moving forward, and we'll see.
Why not have both?
I think they're you still have to, the way I remember that bill ending up is you still have to have the signature on it, and that they still can look if there's questions.
There's nothing in the bill that says that a signature will be added past 2029.
Yeah, I'm saying nothing.
Speaker,
That's not my vote, so.
I know we've touched on this already, but.
Go ahead, Lindsay.
the governor has said to me there will be vetoes. Has he communicated to you what he plans to veto?
I think there's always vetoes. I remember one year there wasn't vetoes, but, I don't wanna, get into the discussions around, with the governor as far as which bills might be vetoed. I'll leave that up to him.
But you have talked about some, it sounds like.
Well, there's always conversations about vetoes every session, so, I'm not sure, we'll see how that looks going forward, but I'll leave that up to the governor to make those comments.
To circle back to HB 300, we've talked a lot about how that's changed through the process. Are you satisfied with where that ended up, or is that something you're going to revisit before before
Let's
midterms,
turn
before
that
the
into
next?
volume.
Performance incentive.
That's a really good question.
Simply letting the private sector keep some of their own money so they can reinvest and continue to produce.
Really good question. Would I like to see different? I absolutely would have. Is it better than what we currently have? I truly believe that it is. Will there need to be details worked out in the coming years? That's why we have till 2029 before it fully gets implemented. And so we'll see as we move through the process. So, yeah.
I think as soon as next year, you might revisit some of those details.
Oh, I'm sure there'll be some of the details that be revisited. I don't suspect you'll see any large, monumental changes to it. I think, cause it'll be hard, I think we'll have a municipal election under our belt, where it will start, and we'll see what happens.
Speaker, is there any chance the tax cuts won't go through as promised, any of the tax cuts?
I think all the tax cut bills are passed, if I'm.
Social Security still needs
Social
passed.
Social Security?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think it'll still pass. So there's broad support. Again, I think the bill's at 90,000, right?
Yeah.
That's where we're going to end up. That's where our caucus wants to end up. Those making $90,000 or less will no longer pay Social Security. Those making above $90,000 will continue to pay Social Security. We wanted to make sure that we targeted the lower, middle class and lower income people, and families. Families was important to the legislature this year for tax cuts, so that's why you saw the two-child or family tax cuts added into the bill.
I think we have time for maybe one more.
No, I think that's good.
The Executive Appropriations Committee set aside $8.25 million for Operation Gigawatt pertaining to nuclear energy. That's obviously an executive function of administering those funds. How do you guys hope that's used? What do you think would be the best way to fast track nuclear power in Utah?
Yeah, I don't know the specifics on how that's gonna be utilized, but just whatever we can do to move the ball forward, right? We know that this is a very important option for us. We're doing everything we can to try to accelerate when it comes to regulatory issues, giving some funding available to help support if there is, potential to work with different entities that are trying to come to Utah or trying to establish a nuclear presence. I just think this will help us to move the ball down the field.
Absolutely, and Idaho National Labs, right? We're excited that memorandum of understanding, I think MOU was signed with Idaho National Labs. We're lucky, University of Utah, right up the road from us. We have a small nuclear reactor there, right? We're one of the few universities in the nation that have one of those. And so there's so many options out there for that $8 million to be spent. We look forward to working closely with the governor's office.
Just one more thing on that. I've had a chance to speak with the majority leaders in the House and Senate, both Idaho and Wyoming, about this compact that we've set up, and there is a lot of excitement around that. We're already talking about getting a meeting together with our 3 states. And we think that, again, is one of those areas that we all agree on, is how do we move nuclear quicker, how can we help support each other's efforts in that?
Speaker, one more question
All right,
on,
real quick.
oh, is that okay? Sort of the theme of the session has been the state and its control over different entities. Salt Lake City, the judiciary, we had Beehive development, alcohol policy, and the proximity issue. Is it a fair criticism that the legislature is trying to control these entities in certain ways, or what would you say to that?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, give me like the
Like
Beehive
with the
development, those types of
Beehive
things.
development was an effort, the sponsor said, to consolidate the tools, right, that the development agency would have, but the public saw it as state coming in and creating this big overseeing agency that is dictating what cities can do. It also had, at one point, a city exemption. Cities couldn't have a say in that development.
Yeah, and that went down pretty quick. I was opposed to that, the way that was drafted. Almost every lawmaker I saw was opposed to that. So, look, the legislative branch is over policy of the state of Utah. We are the closest elected officials to the citizens of the state, And it's important, I think, that those that are elected are making the decisions. And that's, you know, why you saw some of the pushback on the judiciary this year. The judiciary is not accountable to the citizens of the state, but the legislature is. We stayed within our constitutional bounds on every issue that was brought forward. These are things that the legislature has the constitutional authority to discuss. And I think that's important. And I'm very proud of the way the legislature came together on those issues, very proud of the way the judiciary came together on those issues, and I'm really proud of the way forward on them, so.
So.
I think that's all we have time for.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.